Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Jim Ninsel, host of AZ Illustrated Politics, our weekly analysis and commentary on local, state, and national affairs. On tonight's show, the legislative session is over. What does that mean for you? We'll talk with two state lawmakers about highlights of the session. But first, a look at today's top stories.
Tucson is starting a new initiative to end veterans' homelessness. Andrea Kelly has that story.
Tucson Mayor Jonathan Rothschild says it will take government agencies, nonprofits, and private companies, as well as community awareness to get Tucson's homeless veterans into housing in the next 2 years. He says while the focus is on veterans who are homeless, the push to help them will also serve others in the same situation.
Part of what this goal is to do is to increase the infrastructure for all the homeless of the community. When we support Primavera, the Salvation Army, Red Cross, Kodak, Cope, there are going to be others in the homeless community that are going to be supported.
Rothschild says the city has estimated there are about 350 homeless veterans, but that number will rise. Local organizations plan to spend the next 3 months identifying homeless veterans and finding them housing. Then they'll focus on helping veterans find jobs and get health care. I'm Andrea Kelly, Arizona Public Media.
Attorneys for Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio are appealing last month's ruling by a federal judge that the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office racially profiles in immigration enforcement. Arpaio says they're innocent, and that's a look at tonight's headlines.
Fury and unrest in Brazil swelled to new heights last night when 1 million people took to the streets in anti-government protests.
We get the latest on what's fueling the outrage and what Brazil's government might do to quell it.
Then we continue our series Inside Immigration Reform. Tonight we debate whether those seeking permanent residence in the U.S. should be required to learn English.
Money is the root of all evil. It's been said, but could it be true? Paul Salmon reports on new research to determine whether wealth may make us more likely to bend the rules.
People all the way at the top were actually cheating 4 times as much as someone all the way at the bottom, just to win credits for a $50 cash prize.
Mark Shields and David Brooks analyze the week's news.
And we close with the author of a new book, Does Jesus Really Love Me? And his journey as a gay Christian to find answers to that question as churches struggle with homosexuality.
You look at American families and how there isn't one that's untouched by this issue. The conversations are happening at kitchen tables in a way that they weren't.
That's all ahead on tonight's News Hour.
The concept for the show is to go after that week's news in Arizona. What were the hot topics? What were the hot stories of the week? We see this bringing a depth of coverage. We'll take 1 or 2 topics and we'll get deep into them. My excitement comes from the fact that we get to do journalism like this on TV.
Last week, after a dramatic special session, state lawmakers wrapped up the session and called it sine die. Joining me to discuss the session, State Representative Ethan Orr, a Republican from District 9, State Representative Bruce Wheeler, a Democrat from District 10, and Hank Stephenson of the Arizona Capitol Times. Thanks to all of you for being here. Representative Orr, I think the most dramatic battle up there this session had to be over the Medicaid expansion, moving the eligibility for Medicaid or to access up to 133 or 138% of the federal poverty level. You were on the side of the Republicans and Governor Jan Brewer, the few Republicans who crossed party lines, and Governor Jan Brewer on this one. Why was it important to you to see this pass?
Well, I think there's a number of reasons. Obviously, the human side, there were 67,000 people, many of whom were in cancer treatment, but also have a severe mental illness that the state would not have been able to provide coverage for, and on December 31st, you would have just pulled that coverage off. But then also there's a fiscal equation. If you look at the other alternatives in this entire session, I asked people for an alternative. The closest they came to took the state fund balance of $450 million and took it to zero in a year and a half. Now, with the Medicaid expansion and the budget that we just passed, we not only keep that fund balance, but we resolve the structural deficit, which is a decades-old long problem within our state by 2016. And so the true fiscal conservative position is to balance the budget and fix the structural deficit.
And Representative Wheeler, you've said to me that this was probably the biggest accomplishment of your legislative career over the time you served in the previously and also this time.
Without a question, Jim. I think it was historic. As Ethan said, there were two imperatives. There was the moral imperative, the human dimension, and then there was the economic imperative. And I think for once, reason and the love of humanity and economic facts won out the day against extremist political and religious views.
And Hank, you covered this debate in the House of Representatives. Why were the majority of Republicans opposed to the expansion?
Well, a lot of it falls back to this is a plank of Obamacare. And so the Republican majority just could not go along in any way, shape, or form with Obamacare. Another one of the arguments was mostly that this may be a fiscal gain for the state in the short term, but they don't trust the federal government to keep up their end of the bargain. They think that we'll end up paying the entire tab someday for Medicaid expansion, where now we're paying a tenth of the tab. And really, those were the arguments that the other side presented. Very few of them said that in the short term this isn't at least good for the state, but just the distrust of the federal government and hatred for Obamacare really was the main push of the opposition.
And it was a special session that was finally called to get this through. What was the breaking point for Governor Brewer in calling this special session?
I think the breaking point came when House Speaker Andy Tobin decided to adjourn the legislature on a Tuesday and not come back until a Thursday. And the governor's spokesman had a real good one line about how Arizonans usually consider Wednesday a work day. And I think that was really the final straw. But it was months before that kind of delaying, feet dragging, any kind of tactic that the Republican leadership could throw out to kind of stop this from happening. And so finally, when that came, I think the Democrats went to the governor and said, look, we're going to start losing people. We're getting into summer vacation. We've got other things to do with our lives. Let's pull the trigger here. And the governor called a special session that day.
And Representative Orr, what did you think of the special session decision?
You know, I think it had to be done. And, you know, I think that night was a very difficult night for many people. But what you don't see, like Hank alluded to, is the 5 weeks backstory where particularly the 8 of us worked very closely and we begged the speaker to negotiate with the governor. We just wanted a fair up or down vote. And what I saw were a lot of legislative tactics behind the scenes to prevent that vote. And I think whether you supported it or not, people deserve the vote. And so it was kind of the final straw of seeing what we saw was not only the canceling of the session, but the Senate was not meeting on Thursday. And you start getting into, we're in the middle of June, and you can delay this budget for a few weeks pretty easily. And now we've created a crisis because we're voting on a budget with 1 day left as opposed to a few weeks left.
And Representative Wheeler, your thoughts on how that played out?
Well, it was a time issue, and primarily that was eventually the strategy that the Speaker and the leadership in the House had. Normally a session lasts 4 months. We were already into our, past our 5th month, and we actually sine died on the 5th month. So the fact that they were dragging their feet, the fact that the Senate had passed Medicaid and the budget bills May 16th, 4 weeks prior, and now, as Hank said, we were starting to see a postponement, a dragging of feet, and then that was totally unacceptable. We knew that with such a small margin of the 24 Democrats and at that time 8 Republicans, and eventually we had 9, yes. But still that was a margin of 2 and 3, and we couldn't afford to lose people. So the House leadership was looking at a delaying tactic, and I think they were disingenuous and not totally honest with us on that, refusing to negotiate with the governor, as Ethan said, and with the House leadership as well.
And it wasn't just a special session. It was a special session where the coalition decided to suspend the rules of both the House and the Senate that require bills to go to like the Appropriations and the Rules Committee. And then when it came up for debate during a committee of the whole, the coalition refused to answer questions or really engage in the debate at all. Why was that necessary?
We had been debating Medicaid since January 14th. We were employing tactics that had been used against us by the majority. We had 10 bills. 2010 was the last one of the 10 budget bills which contained Medicaid. And in those 10 bills, there were, I think you and I were discussing 52 amendments. If we were to open up more of the delaying tactic, because that's all it was at that point. Medicaid had been debated, the budget had been debated, the Senate had passed it and debated it. We had been wanting it in appropriations. We had been wanting to talk about it. We knew what the issues were. The majority of the Republican Party knew what they were. So it was simply a delaying tactic. Had we opened up to those questions that they wanted to delay the tactic with, Hank, we'd probably still be there.
Any concerns from your perspective on the lack of the debate?
Well, I think one of the other things, to kind of pick up the theme of almost the hypocrisy that was so frustrating, so many of those amendments came across as well-meaning, but when you talked to the sponsor and you got behind the scenes, the only point was to sabotage the bill. For example, there were 8 abortion amendments, and they had nothing to do with abortion. They had everything to do with trying to fracture a coalition. And in my mind, an issue like that is sacred and so important to so many people on both sides of the aisle, deserves a true policy debate, and it shouldn't be used as a political tactic by either side.
And Hank, the still potential roadblocks to this expansion on both the political and the legal front, can you talk a little bit about those?
Yeah, there are really 2 roadblocks that might come up. One of them is former Senators Frank Antinori and Ron Gould are organizing a referendum where they need about 86,000 signatures in the next 90 days to basically put this to an up or down vote by the people. The governor says that because part of this is a budget item, it doesn't really qualify for the referendum. The courts may have to rule in there. But they're actually kicking off their rally tomorrow at the state capitol at 10 a.m. To start gathering signatures. They're organizing Republican precinct committeemen across the state, and it's somewhat of a tall order. I mean, it's more than 1,000 signatures at a day at this point, probably closer to 1,500 because they need kind of a buffer there. But they seem pretty confident they can do it. You know, without paid people, it's a tall order. And then the other side is the Proposition 108 argument. A few years ago, the state passed an initiative that says to increase state revenues, you have to have 2/3 of the legislature in both chambers in agreement with this. And because this didn't have that going through the House or the Senate, it'll probably come to the courts to decide whether this was narrowly crafted enough that it doesn't apply to, that Prop 108 doesn't apply to Medicaid expansion, or maybe it does. There's a lot of legal arguments on either side, so I think a lot of this is going to be up to the hands of the courts now that it's out of the legislature.
Well, one thing that that is interesting about the referendum, and I saw this through the entire debate, and it was so frustrating, is really trying to decouple the federal arguments and the state arguments. One of the things, it was very important to me to make a good policy choice, so I spoke to people from across the political spectrum, and kind of it was an interesting conversation. A week before the event, I sat down with some people from the Goldwater Institute and some of the CEOs that support them, and he talked about a distortion the Obamacare law is going to create within the insurance markets. And so I had to ask him, because it's a pretty bad distortion. And I said, sir, are you telling me that if I vote no on the Medicaid expansion next week, I can stop this terrible thing from happening? He's like, well, no, not really. And I said, wait a minute. Let me understand this. So you're telling me that if I vote no on the Medicaid expansion bill next week, this is going to happen anyway? And he said, yes. And I let the silence there, but what's going through my mind, then why are you bringing this up as an argument against this policy choice? And I think what's happened is people have taken some very important federal arguments and very valid federal arguments about the national debt and tried to bring them into a policy discussion where it doesn't belong.
And you have to discuss the extremism here, the extremism in which reality and numbers and facts don't matter, the extremism both on the political and the religious front. I mean, to have used the abortion issue in that way, I think was really cruel and inconsiderate, and I think it didn't work. But the extremism was very palpable. The anger and the hatred that we saw from the majority Republicans, and Ethan, all due respect to you and your other 8 Republican colleagues, I mean, that was vicious. It was vicious, it was mean, it showed anger, it showed a complete lack of compassion and love, which is what Medicaid is all about.
Thank you. And the abortion argument did affect me personally because it's a very important issue to me personally. you know, every bishop in the state, including Bishop Olmsted, who's probably one of the most conservative Catholic bishops and most pro-life Catholic bishops in the nation, supported the Medicaid expansion, as did many faith leaders throughout our state, because it didn't affect the abortion numbers. And I think you're right. To bring that in, I felt was disingenuous.
And I guess we will see what happens next on both the political and legal front on this particular topic. But I also want to talk about a controversial bit of legislation involving an overhaul of our election laws, a number of changes, including criminalizing the collection of early ballots under certain circumstances, clearing people off the permanent early voting list, raising the bar for third-party candidates to make the ballot. And Hank, there was a last-minute lobbying effort on the behalf of this legislation by some folks back in Washington to try to convince some senators. So tell us a little bit about what happened.
Daniel Scarpinato, who is now a press secretary for the Republican Party, was actually making some last-minute phone calls. This was late at night on Thursday, Friday, I don't even remember anymore. Calling a few key swing senators. The House had just passed this. The Senate had voted it down initially with maybe 2 Republicans voting against it. And Daniel Scarpinato was calling those Republicans, doing a little bit of arm twisting, and eventually they brought it up for a second vote, and it passed with just those 2 flipping on their votes. So that was really interesting. We've heard rumors that maybe House Speaker John Boehner called some of the senators in the Arizona House. We don't know if that really happened, but there was definitely some backroom maneuvering there that happened to get these things through at the very, very last minute. And it was kind of taking a couple of really controversial election bills from earlier in the session and combining them all into one big bill. So this will be very interesting how this goes into effect.
The bottom line is this makes voting a lot more difficult. This is a voter suppression bill that unfortunately was passed and signed by the governor. PEBL, Permanent Early Voter List, permanent. P is for permanent. And to be stricken after 2 elections that a person misses is unconscionable. And to criminalize people that circulate petitions for other people or hand them in for someone else with their permission is also, I think, really unfortunate. This is designed to hurt Democrats, independents, and members of third parties, and simply to help, with all due respect, the Republican Party.
Well, and with due respect to some of the provisions of that, I actually disagree with Bruce on that. You know, many components, I heard this through the Judiciary Committee, many components of this bill were actually supported by all 15 county recorders, all 15, which is a very bipartisan group. I believe there's 7 Democrats, 8 Republicans, all of the elections officials, including our Secretary of State, as something that makes the elections process more efficient. One thing that really, as I thought through this, that became clear to me, I believe that the right to vote is sacred. I don't believe the right to vote conveniently is.
Well, there were, of the 15 election officials, 2 were not in support of this. I think Representative Quesada made that clear on the floor. So it was not unanimous, and it is designed to suppress votes.
And what about the third-party element of this? This is something I think that came up relatively late in the process, the idea of you're raising the bar to require more signatures of these third-party candidates. Right now it's a very low bar, obviously. What do you think of how that turned out?
I didn't draft it. I would not have made it as extreme. I mean, I would not have made it so that everyone has that. I would have probably found a happy medium, because I think it's not realistic, or it's not fair for a libertarian candidate to be able to get on there in some cases with 1 or 2 or 11 signatures. But I think requiring, like in my district, several hundred signatures is probably just is unfair. I would have found a way to cut it in half or a quarter and had at least be something fair.
Bruce, your thoughts on this?
I couldn't disagree more. I think it's a terrible legislation.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the budget. Ethan, you've said you were pleased with a lot of the results of the budget in terms of some of the education funding.
Absolutely. And one thing, the bill that just the governor signed yesterday was also adds kind of icing onto the cake, was $24.99, which highly supports our JTED in terms of what the relationships they can do. We'll get to that.
You should explain what a JTED is.
I'm sorry, the Joint Technological Educational District. It's vocational and career education. They have about a 98% graduation rate. It's one of the things, I think the the shining stars in the educational community. It really works. We increased JTED funding. We also were able to support the U of A Medical School. One of the things that was so important to me as I go throughout the district is people saying we don't have enough medical professionals, and this is the way, the medical school in Phoenix is the way that we can get more doctors and more residents into our state, so we need to support that. We also supported the U of A University Performance Funding money, which allows us as a university to really chart a course to excellence and then fund that path.
GED got funded finally.
Yes.
That's the adult education that was cut a few years back and,
That's right.
and has had
To
zero
zero.
state support over the last few years.
That was
And it's crucial to getting federal funds, matching funds
Correct.
coming in to support these
That
programs.
was a big victory. The budget actually, as a compromise between a House majority, actually was a good bill. Education, we're not where we were in 08, and we need to get there. And hopefully segments of this new coalition will hold together next year so that Governor Brewer will have a legacy now of not only Medicaid, but education. So GED got funded, CPS got funded, JTED, as you mentioned. I mean, there were some really good parts in here. $82 million for education to make up for the loss of inflation for school buildings. There were some really good components. We need to go further, and I think next session we have that opportunity.
I think we will, and there's even with there's R&D tax credits, and there's also some things that help people by indexing it to inflation. So one of the things that I like about this budget, not only is it structurally balanced, but if you were to take people and kind of blindfold them and say this is the budget, I'd say about 60 or 40 out of 60 of the House members would support it. So it's a good bipartisan budget that a vast majority of people support.
And Bruce mentioned the whole idea of a coalition that we saw emerge on this whole Medicaid and the budget holding together in future sessions. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it will hold together. I think one of the things that I hear consistently from people is they want us to be working together. Working together doesn't mean one side acquiescing to the other. I think it means having substantial policy debates where I take what I believe and I put it on the table and admit I could be wrong or you could help me make this better. I think people deserve genuine policy arguments across the aisle, and that's what they got this session.
And Hank, what are your thoughts on number one, whether that coalition can hold together, and number two, how the Republican caucus is going to come together in the wake of the Medicaid vote?
Well, I'm kind of curious if the coalition can hold together. You know, a lot of people were looking to that elections bill as kind of the sign whether this is going to be a one-time deal for Medicaid expansion in this budget, or whether or not you guys are willing to work together, kind of cut some deals. And when that went down just basically along party lines, a lot of people kind of said, well, there goes the honeymoon.
Well, I think the bill that really was more symbolic of the coalition holding together was the TPT, the sales tax reform, because Doug Coleman, who was a former mayor of Apache Junction and one of us, actually was one of the people that behind the scenes got the league back to the table and brought that deal together, and really it was all of us supporting him in that negotiating room.
But that went down, I mean, that was unanimous from both chambers at the final moment there, so that wasn't really a divisive vote in the end, as it was through the entire session.
Republicans are still going to act like Republicans, and we have our principles as well. But I think on getting back to the education one, I know that Ethan and the 9 Republicans that joined us on Medicaid, Doris Goodale, the chair of the House Education Commission for Exam Committee, these are people that on those issues of importance like education, recognizing that the cuts in 08 and 09 were severe and damaging, and that we have to crawl or dig ourselves back out of those holes that we dug ourselves in 08 and 09. They understand that. I think that's the promise of the coalition. On elections and many other issues, we're going to continue to have differences. But I think on education, we really have an opportunity.
Speaking of education funding,
I mean, you don't want us. I mean, I am a Republican, and there are issues that I agree with my party. There are issues that sometimes I disagree with members of my party.
Totally agree.
But I think we need to have a significant and a sincere debate, and that's what we're seeing.
And speaking of education funding, what kind of happened with the community colleges? They seem to kind of get the short end of the stick from this budget. What was the problem?
Well, they didn't get enough. I don't know what the argument was behind the scenes with not all counties qualifying. Maricopa and Pima were kept out. I certainly don't agree with that. So I don't know all the details, but overall, there was progress in education, K through 12 universities, U of A Medical Center, on and on. There were a lot of positive steps, and I think we're going to build on them next year. I really think that the governor in her last term is going to look at her legacy beyond Medicaid, and I think the last one is going to be education. I think she's really going to push for that. She's a fighter, And I know that the 9 of you are largely supportive of those education efforts, and I think that's where we're going to find commonality. And I don't think there's a more important issue in this state than funding education properly and moving our educational standards up.
And let me ask you, Ethan, do you have, community colleges were one of the few areas of spending where it actually decreased this year. As the coalition came together to kind of craft this budget, why weren't community colleges?
Well, and community college, I'm very supportive of community colleges. In fact, one of the bills that I ran earlier this session, the governor signed, generated $1.2 million for Pima Community College by resolving a conflict they've had with Santa Cruz County. So, I mean, that generated more funding, and I think we increased $2 million for the rural community colleges. I think what it came down to is we wanted to make sure overall the budget was lower than the House and that it was structurally balanced, and so it just became a matter of they're very important, but you can't fund everything, even if you think it's important.
And speaking of funding things, Ethan, I know one of the bills you pushed earlier this year had your mental health first aid. You were working with your seatmate Victoria Steele on that, and that was something that grew out of the terrible shooting here in the community, and Gabrielle Gifford's Congress on Your Corner. And talk a little bit about what the mental health first aid training is, and you ended up, instead of $500,000, with $250,000 for that in the budget?
I am very pleased with that in the budget. Basically, I think community violence is something that troubles many people in our city, especially after the shooting, and we need to have a real solution, and I think this is one of them. This is an evidence-based program that helps people who are having experienced mental health issues like Jared Loeffner. It identifies them, helps people identify them, and then I want to work with our mental health community to get them the treatment they need. And so this was an earmark. It was a complete bipartisan process. In fact, it came out of a conversation Victoria Steele and I had while we were on the campaign. We said we want to do something together, and we want to do something to honor Gabby and to address the fears in our community. And I think this not only was something where we were able to work across the aisle, but it works in addressing community violence.
And you've been here long enough to know that what you're also seeing, this is an example of Southern Arizona and Tucson legislators, regardless of party, coming together to work for what's good for Southern Arizona. And of course, in this case, it's statewide. Yes. But I think we're going to see more of that. You know, the Frank Antenoris are now sidelined. Yes, they're there, they're a threat, but we have people like Ethan that are responsible and willing to work together, and I think that's critical.
And I think we're down to about a minute left on the program, but I wanted to ask, not too many firearm bills actually managed to get passed, but one of them involved gun buybacks, and that was triggered by a gun buyback the city of Tucson sponsored, and then the legislature moved to make sure that gun buybacks would no longer be possible by cities and towns. Bruce, your thoughts on that one?
Unconscionable that we don't allow local control of issues, including gun buybacks. I mean, that's something that Tucson's community believes in. That's something the mayor and the city council believe in. They voted on it unanimously. Steve Kozachik took the role on that and did a lot of good. For the legislature to come in and say, we know better than you, we're going to tell you, the city of Tucson, how to run your affairs, I think is contrary to what the original Republican principles were of local control, allowing local control. I think it's unconscionable, and we'll have to keep trying again.
Okay, we got about 20 seconds left, Ethan. I'll let you get the last word.
You know, that was not about the gun buyback program. It was about creating a revenue stream to support things. And one of the things about gun buyback programs that I find troubling, if you look at all of the evidence, they are marginally effective at best. Things like broken windows theories, things like actually having evidence-based sentencing reduces crime, and I want to focus on things that reduce crime and make people feel safer, not just make them feel safer.
All right, and we're going to have to end it there, but I want to thank all of you for coming here, letting our viewers know a little bit more about what happened in this session, and we will be right back with some closing thoughts. That's our show for tonight, but you can learn more about politics by visiting azpm.org or by following us on Facebook and Twitter. I'm Jim Ninsel. Thanks for watching another edition of AZ Illustrated Politics.